Welcome to the Power Factor Show.
The bandwidth for this episode of the Power Factor Show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network, firearmsradio.tv.
Sponsored by Taylor Freelance, Rainier Ballistics, Hodgdon Powders, and JPL Precision.
Hey everybody, we are going to be doing another episode with Chris Hodgdon like we've done in the past to basically get your questions and anything that you have on your mind answered. So if you have anything, load questions about powder, questions about the industry, questions about Hodgdon, stuff like that, go ahead and get the question into us and we will forward it on to Chris and have him hopefully answer it during the upcoming episode. So as usual, go ahead and send your questions or anything that's on your mind to powerfactorshow@gmail.com, and we will get this episode done probably here in the next few weeks or so. Thanks.
Hey Power Factor fans, I'm Rick, and we're back for another garage episode. We had planned to do some shooting, and then of course it started raining, and as you well know, I do not shoot or videotape in the rain. So we do a little garage stuff, and we'll hopefully get to shooting here in the next couple of episodes. So we did a little, Rick's got an old Webley revolver spiel at an episode, 6 or 8 episodes back, and at that time the gun was soaking in rust dissolving agents. I tried mineral spirits at first, and then I tried some WD-40 because I happened to have a can laying around. Neither of them really worked all that well, but I did eventually kind of get it apart. There were some parts missing. I just kind of gave up on trying to replace the parts. A parts gun showed up on Gunbroker. I was kind of excited about that, but it didn't have a whole lot more parts than my gun, and it was $300, and I just thought, this thing's never going to shoot. Doesn't matter, but at least try to get it apart. So I was able to get it apart. So here it is. Again, this is the my black shirt. It doesn't show all that well. This is the Webley RIC No.1 first pattern. It was made about 1870, and I was able to get most of the rust off. As you can see, it's cleaned up pretty well. There's still a lot of pitting and stuff on it. But at least I was able to kind of free up the parts. And I think I made mention of the extractor feature, the ejection feature. There's this central ejector rod that runs through the hollow cylinder base pin. So to unload the gun, you pull out the rod until it's clear of the frame. Flip open the ejector port here on the side, just like you would on a Colt single action. And then once you get the rod clear of the frame, there's this crane that rotates on the barrel, and you can see how it rotates in and out of position. So then you just run the rod back like this to eject your empties, and of course you got to run them one at a time. Then you rotate the cylinder, run the next one out, and then when you're done with your ejecting, you just rotate the crane back to 6 o'clock and then push the ejector rod back in, and there you are, all set to go. And so getting all this kind of unstuck, it was all frozen and pretty rusty. Just kind of getting all this unstuck, I think, is about the extent of the restoration that I'm going to be able to do on it. I was able to determine, both based on pictures I'd seen of the gun and also inspecting this, it looks like there were some nickel-plated parts. The cylinder base pin, the head on the ejector, the hammer, the trigger, and this kind of secondary trigger here in the back. Those were at one time all nickel plated, and the rest was polished bluing, but the bluing is all gone, and there's just kind of little remnants. You can see the part of the trigger that was previously protected by the trigger guard. I don't know if I can get the light on there. If you look up in there, you can still see little vestiges of the nickel plating. But anyway, so there it is. I'm probably now, my secondary plan, I think, as I mentioned before, is I'm probably just going to do a little shadow box based on the old theory that this was General Custer's gun of choice. His sidearm was the Webley RIC, and I've been to the Little Bighorn. I took a bunch of pictures when I was there. So I think I'm just going to do a little shadow box, maybe come up with a little 7th Cavalry logo and stuff, and just do a little kind of static display. And then if someday a trigger guard shows up, maybe I'll still make an attempt to get it in more complete condition. But anyway, a little bit of a project. That's about as far as it's going to go, though. So if you're interested in the Webley, there it is. And it was a little bit of fun. My rust removing endeavors were kind of mixed bag in terms of results. I'd read and was aware that mineral spirits are a good rust remover, so I bought one of these foil baking pans that you can get at the supermarket, and then just essentially stuck this thing in the pan and filled the pan then about halfway with mineral spirits, so the gun was half submerged. And then every couple of days I'd flip it over, get out a toothbrush, of course took the grips off, get out a toothbrush and brush it, and then every couple of days I'd flip it back. And I did that for a few weeks. And it didn't really, the mineral spirits are white. They're odorless mineral spirits, and instead of being clear like what I remember as a kid, it looks kind of milky. And they'd turned a definite rusty color. So I decided that it had gone just about as far as it was going to go, and decided, let's try something else. That makes a lot of sense, right? So I got a different pan, and then I started squirting it with WD-40, which I knew was a rust remover. Not much of a penetrant, as it turns out. I'd hose it down with WD-40, get the toothbrush out, brush it off, and then I'd let it sit for a few days, and I'd hose it off again. And bit by bit, stuff started to kind of come loose, and I've discovered that if you cock the hammer, and if you look in here, you can see the head of the ejector rod. And now it's out, and now it's in. You can just see the tip of it in there. And so I got a long, skinny punch, and was able to punch the ejector rod out from the back. And then once that was clear, I left it in this little crane, this little tube here, because I didn't want to crush the tube. So I left the ejector in there, so it was just clear of the frame, but still was completely filling this little crane piece because I didn't want to damage it. And then once I got it to this point, I started to tap directly on this with a mallet, a little plastic mallet. And it moved just enough to clear the center of the base pin, and then I just kind of used the mallet to whack it back and forth, and then it loosened up completely. And then of course I was able to get the base pin out and remove the cylinder and whatnot. And so that was kind of the extent of my mechanical work on the gun, was just getting it apart so I could scrub out the chambers and the barrel. The barrel's actually in pretty good shape. I have another Webley, a Webley Mark 1 from the late 1880s, and the barrel on that is just like a sewer. But this gun actually has a decent barrel. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll ever fire again. But yeah, once I got it apart, I was able to get the cylinder out, and I still was not able to do anything about the internal bits. There's a couple of missing springs in here and the trigger guard. But anyway, at least it's preserved or conserved. It shouldn't deteriorate anymore. There's no more rust, active rust on it. So anyway, it was a little bit of an interesting experiment.
Hey everybody, this is Steve again. We're going to take another chapter out of the Break 'em All, the complete guide to fixing clay target shooting problems. The subject today we're going to discuss is erratic swing movements. So again, this book breaks everything down into basically four points. What it really means, how do I know if I'm doing it, how do I stop doing it, and then finally things I can do to prevent it from happening again. So erratic swing movements, having a non-smooth movement of the barrel to the target, including the follow-through, constitutes an erratic swing movement. The incorrect part of this movement may occur in several ways for several different reasons. Let's look at some of the more typical moves. So the swing does not match the speed and flight of the target by going much faster than the target. The gun barrel is passing through the target zone too quickly, and the required timing of the trigger becomes too precise. So an example of this is, in terms of lead technique, is what's called swing through. And swing through method basically has you mounting behind the bird, accelerating the barrel through the bird, and then braking the shot as the barrel passes through and gets in front of it. The problem is that in order to do this, your timing needs to be really precise. In fact, I've heard before that the amount of time that the barrel is in the right position constitutes about 5% of the whole entire swing. So it's like you're behind on the right spot and then too far in front. So you really need to be pretty precise in doing this. Now, a lot of hunters actually use this technique because the thing for them is that they don't know where the bird is coming from, where it's going, and more often than not, you're starting from behind the bird. The same thing is kind of true in trap shooting. You don't know where the bird's going to go, so you're usually trying to get out in front of it. But at least in trap shooting, the bird levels out typically, and you have a little bit more time there. But in crossing shots, it's more difficult to do. So another point here is that it says when a shooter has a wildly exaggerated swing, he or she is giving up control. We've talked before about trying to control the bird, and that's really important. The idea is that you want to be in control of the bird as opposed to the bird being in control of you. Now, what does that mean? Well, the idea of you being in control of the bird is that as long as you don't feel panicked or rushed or exaggerating your movements or things of this nature, you are in control of the bird. When you have the bird, you're locked onto it solid, you're in sync with it, everything feels right or whatever, you're in control of it. But when the bird gets in control of you, it comes out, it's too fast, you're trying to catch up to it, you're rushing to get the gun in front of the bird, that's the bird controlling you. In shooting, it is better to move the gun with the target as in a dance, matching the target's movement and direction. Good shooters have an economy of motion. So it says the second type of swing fault is the two-speed swing. The movement to the target looks to be in sync with the target's speed and in direction, but after the shot is fired, the barrel accelerates into a follow-through that is no longer matches the original flight or speed. So the idea there, I think, is that the other type of lead technique is called pull away. And pull away is you mount the gun onto the bird, you track the bird for a bit, and then when it gets into your break point, you start accelerating the gun and get the gun into the right lead and then break the shot. Again, this is a little bit, timing dependent, and some guys are really good at pull-away method in terms of their shooting techniques. But again, I think it kind of, at least personally speaking, opens the door up for having issues because you need to, at that last moment, push the gun in front of the bird, and all of a sudden the gun is then accelerating or going faster than the bird. The problem with doing this is that your eyes are drawn to movement. And if the gun and the bird are going the same speed, then everything appears to be stopped. It's in, effectively slow motion. They're relative to each other. Nothing's really moving. But when the gun is going faster than the bird, then your eyes are drawn to basically whatever's moving in the picture. So the problem is that when the gun is going faster, as in the very last part where you're trying to break the shot, you accelerate, your eyes will be drawn to movement and will come off or can come off the bird and back onto the gun, which you don't want to have happen. You want to stay locked onto that bird. So those are the two reasons why I'm not really a big fan of either swing through or pull away, is because of the fact that the timing is really critical, and they also result in a barrel speed that's moving faster than the bird speed. Another swing fault is abruptly stopping the swing after the shot and not continuing a smooth follow-through. This may indicate that the body is incorrectly positioned for that particular target presentation and that the body is binding up at a crucial moment. So one thing that you need to do is that when you go to take a target, you pick your break point. And what I like to do is basically at that break point where I intend to break the target, I'll mount the gun and come through the break point and make sure that I have extra room, so to speak, on the downhill side of it. The idea is that if the target travels further than I wasn't expecting it to, or whatever happens, that I still have basically allowance or movement in my body that I can track it. What will happen is that guys will set up comfortably for their hold point, and then as the target moves, they get to their break point and they start binding up. And when they bind up, the gun stops or slows down. Okay, it says here, still another swing fault is the shooter's first move to the target is abrupt or jerky because the target seemed to get the jump on him or her. Having the wrong hold point for the barrel or the wrong focal point for the eyes can cause this. If the target overtakes the barrel or jumps through the visual zone before the shooter can react, the individual's instincts will cause him to rush the movement to the target in an effort to try to catch the target before it gets away. I just realized something here. I've mentioned break point, I've mentioned hold point, look point. I think, what we ought to do is an episode some point in the future here about the definitions of break point, hold point, and look point, and go out to the range and actually show you guys what this all means so you can kind of put it together. And I realized before in the past, John and I have thrown around terms like break point, hold point, look point, and foot position and stuff like that. But I think it would actually be good to actually show you what this is and maybe discuss some of the points here. But the idea here is that the problem is that if you have the wrong setup, I'm just going to call it setup point right now, or hold point, look point, and the target comes out and your eyes don't lock onto it immediately, or the gun's, let's say, too far close to the trap, it what it calls beats you. It basically gets out in front of you, and all of a sudden, we mentioned you are no longer in control of the bird. You've got to rush to catch up to it. You kind of go into panic mode. When your brain goes into panic mode, it usually doesn't do very good on shooting. So that's one of the signs this is happening, is that all of a sudden when the bird comes out, the person will then all of a sudden accelerate the gun really fast trying to catch up to it. It's really herky-jerky looking, and you can tell when it happens when somebody gets beat by a target, because they're sitting there and the target comes out and it's like they're not doing anything, and all of a sudden the gun moves really quick. So how do I know if I'm doing it? Through videotaping or using an observer, determine if your barrel movement is erratic. Look at the overall smoothness of the swing and where the gun finishes after the shot. Okay, here are some key points. If it is near the target flight path or away from it, does the speed look consistent and smooth? Could you have followed the target to the ground with your swing? Does your swing end with a shot or after your body runs out of swing? Are your target hits inconsistent? They mentioned something here which was really kind of interesting about tracking the bird all the way to the ground. And when I went out and did my dry fire practice, that dry fire when I was going through my surgery rehab, that's one of the things I was doing is when I was dry firing with the squad, I would mount onto the bird, track it, and track the bits or the parts all the way through after they broke it literally to the ground, just to maintain just smoothness and following a bird. And I felt that really helped me quite a bit. The answers to these questions will tell you if your swing has become erratic or not. To become more aware of your swing, try dry fire practice on a target. Wow. That's pretty earth-shattering in that I actually did that before reading this part of the book. So try dry firing on a target without the shot going off. You should be able to evaluate the smoothness of your swing and follow through. How do I stop doing it? Spend some time practice firing at dry firing at targets, shooting with an empty gun. Make a good swing and pull the trigger on an empty hole. Keep following the target and shoot it again several times. Feel the connection between your swing and the target's flight. Okay. This is really interesting. During my rehab, I mentioned before that what I did for a period of 2 weeks is I went out with the squad and I dry fired on every single target that was thrown. So in a given day, I think I shot 300 targets. Shot 600 targets and had about 300 gun mounts, which at that time for me was really good because I was working on just trying to build up strength. And that was one way of doing it. But what I really felt is that this helped me immensely get into seeing the sight picture, getting the gun in front of the bird, being able to track the bird. I would track the bird, like I just mentioned, parts of the bird. When it was broken, when it wasn't broken, I would track it to the ground. It also allowed me to effectively mount onto the second bird of pairs. So when they throw what's called a true pair, when the shooter was taking the first bird, I was actually tracking the second bird. And it allowed me to kind of play around with different insertion points and stuff like that. And I really felt that helped my shooting, or I should say my live fire shooting out a lot, because I had literally just showed my mind, or allowed my mind to see the proper bird-barrel relationship and also being in sync with the bird. And I've heard, in fact, Gil Ash, where I picked that up from is that Gil Ash had mentioned that as a really valuable shooting techniques, and here again it is mentioned here. I'm a firm believer, if you start hearing the same story from different sources, that there might actually be some truth or validity to the story that they're telling. So it says, once you feel comfortable with your positions and swing during the dry fire practice, go ahead and shoot some targets. If you have the ability, let's say you go out, you're shooting skeet or shooting sporting clays, if you have the ability in the squad that you're in, if they're allow you to do this, stand off to the side and dry fire some of these targets when it's not your turn, as long as you're in a safe position to do so and you've let everybody else know in advance and they're all okay with it. I would really recommend doing this, because when you take breaking the shot out of the equation, you really start seeing a lot more than what you normally do when you're focused on trying to break the bird. And what I've kind of learned here recently is I'm changing the definition of success from breaking the bird to seeing what I consider a really good bird-barrel relationship. And I'm finding that when I start focusing more on the bird-barrel relationship of seeing the right pitcher, that everything is really smooth, it's consistent, and the byproduct is I'm breaking a lot of birds. So if you have the ability to go out and do some of this dry fire stuff when you go shooting to the range next time, I would really recommend doing it. Another practice game to help develop a smooth one-piece swing is called Follow the Chip. I played that game before too. During this live fire exercise, you will practice being ready to shoot at the target a second time if you miss. Let's see what this says. To play these, follow these steps. Choose a crossing target at close to moderate distance. Load 2 shells into the gun and call for the target and shoot the target. If the target is broken, okay, pick out one of the chips and shoot it. I've done that. If you miss the first shot, shoot the target again with a second shot. Keep score. 1 point for breaking the target with either shot and 2 points for breaking the target and then hitting one of his chips. So this is really good, because when you start putting the score thing in it, you have something tangible you're trying to work toward, but you're also, unbeknownst to you, actually improving your fundamentals, because you're staying on the gun, on the bird, tracking it. A lot of times what happens is guys will break a shot and then lift their head off to see what they did, to check their work, so to speak. Following the chip keeps your head locked down onto the gun and tracking the bird actually all the way through the flight path. And you'll also find that by following the chip, or at least keeping your head down, that your follow-through will be better as a result of doing that. Okay, so things I can do to prevent it from happening. Again, during practice, learn how to focus your attention on the target, break, and stay visibly attached. It's like I just said this. Stay visibly attached to the target pieces as if ready to shoot it again. It's like I wrote this book. Start with dry firing and work into shooting real targets. Think smooth. Frequently videotape your practices. Review these tapes will provide you with the feedback as you progress and point out areas where further work is needed. Identify for each target to be shot the optimal place to shoot it, that it should be broken, and position your feet for that spot. And that's kind of something we talked about before, and we'll talk about during the future break point, hold point, look point. But the idea is that you want to position your body to the break point, not position your body where it feels comfortable at your hold point. So the result of that is that a lot of times when you are, let's say, dealing with a really hard crossing target, is that you're literally going to be bound up and twisted at your hold point so that you unwind in your break point. The same fundamental is true actually in pistol shooting. I've done this a lot, where you, let's say, have 2 sets of targets, one to the left, one to the right, and you want to have a really fast transition from your left to your right, is that you set up into the right target, twist yourself into the other target for your draw point, so you draw into that target, shoot, and unwind quickly. The same idea is somewhat here true in shotgunning, is that you basically set yourself up for the ending spot here by twisting yourself up into the starting spot, so as you unwind into the targets that you're trying to break. So hope you learned from something from this. If you have any questions, send us an email at powerfactorshow.com, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.